Locked in the bunker, shadows shake. One man clapping secrets awake. Board games living, dice they break. Echoes pound and hearts they quake. In the bunker, board games rolling. One man clapping, stories growing. Hard rock thunder, speakers blowing. Clapping loud, the unknown sound.
Welcome to the sound of one man clapping. I am the one man coming to you direct from the bunker. I started a new job last week, and adulting seems to be getting in the way of this lovely little podcast that I call home. Adulting, 1 star, do not recommend. True story. This is a podcast about board gaming culture, and growing old gracelessly. The first two I'm not so bad at. The last one I am really freaking good at. Sharing with you today all the games that were. We're going to talk about what's coming in with incoming! 4 exclamation marks. We'll hit the crowdfunding vibes with FOMOMOFO, and then we'll chat with the voices in my head before giving someone the clap. On with the show. Well, forgive me, clappers, for I have sinned. It's been 2 weeks since my last... wrong booth. I've been traveling for the last couple of weeks for work, and I was up in sunny Brisbane, which was not... Well, it was sunny to start, and then not so sunny, and then it was getting a bit cyclone-y. If you are in Australia, you know what I'm talking about. If you're without Australia, well, then you don't know what I'm talking about, but you can probably picture what a cyclone is. Great big Wizard of Oz type storm. Bigger than the Wizard of Oz type storm was going to sort of come into Brisbane, make my day really, really bad. So they flew me home early, which was nice. I was home on Wednesday this week, but I was up there for 2 weeks. And traveling for 2 weeks means little games. And then I was starting a new job in a new office, learning new things. I didn't have a lot of time, a lot of energy, but I did go down the well with my good mate Buttons and Bugs. I'm not going to really get into this one too much because I've talked about it before. But I was playing the Mind Thief, which, according to everyone out there, is like the easiest character. I wasn't finding it so, but okay. Turns out, not playing the game right. So this is the only thing I want to talk about, is if you're playing Buttons and Bugs, and if you've played Jaws of the Lion, Gloomhaven, Frosthaven, you know about the elements. The elements are a way that power up, it's a mechanic that can power up your ability or layer your ability, give you extra abilities, extra strength and abilities that you have in your cards. And Buttons and Bugs, like Gloomhaven and Frosthaven and whatnot, you know, it's about hand management. And typically, you've got to play a card with the element on it, and that charges it up, and you can use it later. Well, guess what? If there's an element on a card in your hand, on a card on the table that you've already played, or on a card that's in ongoing play, you can use it. You can use it once per round. It doesn't matter whether you've played the card or not. The bad guys can use it too. They don't often, because they will often charge and use their own, but they can, if they get to it before you with their initiative, they can use it before you. So, huzzah! All these new abilities are open to me that I thought were going to be really, really hard to use, that I was like, oh, how am I supposed to do this? I don't even have the element on the card. Well, I do. It's right there. So I'm having a good time. I got about halfway through the campaign. I think I'm going to pick it up again. I'm not traveling anymore, but I'm going to pick it up again in the bunker because I really would like to see how it unfolds to the end. This time, I'm playing with one character all the way through. In the past, I've sort of house ruled. I don't even know if it's a house rule. I don't know if you're supposed to or not. Jump back and forth between characters depending on how I felt. I'm going to stick with the Mind Thief and just keep going. He's got some great power, some great abilities. Buttons and Bugs, loads of fun, tiny box, feels like Gloomhaven. Got a second game in of Galactic Cruise with Super Trooper Project L and the Cracker down here in the bunker. This was last weekend in between my weeks in Brisbane, and we did this one with the training wheels off. And so for those of you that don't know, for your first game of Galactic Cruise, you play with one side of the board. It's got all of the departments laid out on the board. It's got the technologies laid out. It's got the bonus for your expert worker laid out on the board. And it kind of eases you into the game with a layout that's a little bit more forgiving. Well, we took it to the next step where you randomize all that, and it really did feel like a harder game. I know Project L mentioned about halfway through that she felt like she was really not struggling, but having to really plan a little bit more. And I love that Kins and Key gave us that first side of the board. I'd happily play that first side of the board again, probably 2, 3, 4 times. It's not boring. It is an easier layout that allows you to meaningfully connect your actions together. And it also gives you technologies, and technologies are basically boosts to your actions, which are easy to grok, easy to understand, easy to layer in. I absolutely love Galactic Cruise. I loved playing with the randomized side of the board. There are 2 more expansions that layer into it that add other layers. I'd like to play it a couple more times before I put those in, but certainly would be very happy to play with those. They basically make the blueprints a little harder and give your people... I think it's different things to do in space. I don't want to go into too much detail. Listen to our last episode. Galactic Cruise was covered last week, 2 weeks ago. Sorry, my bad. In a little more detail. But really, really enjoyed this playthrough. I would love to get Galactic Cruise to the table something like once a month. I know that's like the wet dream of all of us, right? Like, oh, I love this game. Let's play it once a month. But the solo looks great. The solo bot looks really easy to manage. You basically have 2... dummies out on the board, which help to clog up the map a little and make your choices a little bit harder to make. And I would happily play it solo. So I think my next game will probably be solo because I know I'm not playing it this weekend. And next weekend I'm going overseas for 2 weeks and I'm not traveling with Galactic Cruise. I can tell you that much. Galactic Cruise recently delivered from crowdfunding. Kins and Key Games. This is literally their first game. They have knocked it out of the park for a first game. And of course, the art's by my girl Ian O'Toole, who okay, Ian's not my girl, but I love his work. And after that same day with the same group, we played Critter Kitchen. Now, Critter Kitchen is something that Super Trooper just got from crowdfunding. Critter Kitchen is I wouldn't call it lightweight. I would call it maybe on the lighter end of. It's not even midweight. It's a light and breezy fun game. In fact, when you put it on the table, if you were looking out of the corner of your eye, you would think it was Flamecraft. Part of that's because the art's by Sandra Tang, who also did the Flamecraft art, and it's got that really whimsical sort of fantastical feel, lots of block colors, lots of sort of bright splotches. How do you describe Critter Kitchen? When you're playing, if you played Flamecraft, it's not the same game, but it has the same kind of feel in that with Critter Kitchen, you're basically blind bidding at the start of the game with your 3 workers 4 different workspaces. So obviously in Flamecraft, you're straight out putting workers out. And if you want to put another worker out, you've got to pay to get in there. It's like you're throwing drumsticks down for the dragons to know on to distract them. And this one, you're blind bidding. Almost furnace-y. You've got 3 workers of different strengths, and the stronger the worker is, the more they're going to be able to do when they're in the space. The push-pull on this is the stronger your worker is, the slower they are because they're physically bigger, is the theme. You know, you've got this little tiny sort of flying mouse dragon who can only do one thing if they get into that space, and really getting into these spaces, the only thing they're doing is getting shopping ingredients because you're cooking, and you're cooking for the critic at the end of the game. So your little mouse can get in and they can grab an ingredient, but they're going to go first. And so if you know you want that 7-point meat, because the ingredients all have different levels on them, and you're trying to build a plate worth so many points, well, you can throw your little mouse in there, but it's only going to get 1. Now, if you put your great big fat boy in there, I can't remember what he is. He's another dragon-y type dude. He's going to be able to get 3 ingredients if there are any left, because the ingredients are drawn out of a bag, they go on, and the space will have 3 or 4 or 5 ingredients. And if you have 3 big boys on there, well, 3 big boys will take 9 ingredients, and you'd go in turn order. And it's a delightful screw you sort of game. It really is. It's like, if there's an ingredient on there that is really, really good, you can kind of look around the table and you can't see what ingredients everyone else has. We've all got these little shields up, so our little pantry's hiding behind the shield, but you're kind of reading everyone's face like you're playing poker to go, this Super Trooper want that 7-point meat. I can't remember what the hell he has. Screw it. So you can either throw your little mouse in there, you're getting that 7-point meat. So long as someone else doesn't put their little mouse in there and they're not ahead of you on the screw you track, because it's not a turn order track, it is a screw you track. Someone else puts their little mouse in there, and if it's a really good ingredient and there are 3 fucking mice in there, you're not going to get anything, right? Or you can get soup from the soup kitchen as a consolation prize. And soup is like a wild ingredient that you can throw in if you need to, but it really sucks. Soup is like all the scraps off the table. Critter Kitchen is a blast. It's way meatier than it looks like it should be when it's on the table. This version of it is like the Voidfall Galactic box version of Critter Kitchen. Critter Kitchen could probably fit in a Tiny Epic Games box realistically, and it would play exactly the same. You'd put the cards out, you put a little track out, you got your little tokens, it would play exactly the same. Super Troopers version comes in something that looks almost the size of the Anachrony big box. It's got minis and minis and minis for minis, because there's also a sous chef mechanic where you can get a sous chef. And the minis, they're not plastic minis, they're little silk screen semi 2D minis, standees. They look great. They look absolutely great. I don't think there's any plastic in the box, actually, from memory. Everything's wood and cardboard, which I love. I love, love, love. Metal coins, I think. I can't remember. It's all blending together now. Were the metal coins? Super Trooper, hop online. You can correct me. Anyway, it was the Uber Deluxe version. It had everything, all the bits, all the extra bits, all the expansions, all the other expansions, all the bits that go with the expansions. And it was a blast to play. Critter Kitchens by Alex Cutler and Peter C. Hayward, and published by Cardboard Alchemy, who are developing a reputation for overproduced games. If you're not au fait with Cardboard Alchemy, they recently also produced and distributed Andromeda's Edge, which has all the plastic. And Andromeda's Edge is one that I am very much looking forward to getting to the table again, perhaps with this same crew. Later that same day, I got Fairy Ring to the table. Now, Fairy Ring is a game that I bought at PAX last year in October, and it has been on my shelf of firsts since October. So I'm going to embarrass myself by counting on my fingers. That's November, December, January, February. That's 5 months. Now, Fairy Ring's in a very smallish box. The box is probably only about 3 centimeters tall, and it's 22 centimeters on the side and a little square. Beautiful box, UV spot and gloss and all that stuff. And you open it up, and you've got these lovely little acrylic standee fairies. There's a bumblebee fairy, and there's a little mushroom fairy, whatever it is. They're gorgeous, gorgeous little acrylic standees. And Fairy Ring is a freaking delight to play. So the Peanut and I played Fairy Ring. We got on the table and we played Fairy Ring. It was probably a 10-minute teach. And in all honesty, I think the best way to teach Fairy Ring is to just go, hey, I'm going to take a turn. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Or you take a turn. It doesn't matter, right? So you've got a hand of cards, and you're going to pre-program a card face down that has a mushroom on it. There are, I think, 4 or 5 different kinds of mushrooms. And you've got a starting mushroom out. And what you're going to do is you pre-program it, and then you put your hand of cards down. And on your turn, in turn order, you're going to flip that card over and you're going to play it. Now, if it's the same mushroom as one you have in front of you, so if I have the blue mushroom in front of me and I've played a blue mushroom, it lays over top of that blue mushroom and makes it 2 mushrooms tall. If it's a different one, I put it to the left or the right of the mushroom I have. And now I have 2 mushrooms, and we're creating a fairy ring on the table. Right? For those of you that don't know, the fairy ring is the ring of mushrooms that surrounds the little invisible fairy village or house out in the woods. It's always been said if you see a little ring of mushrooms, that's where a fairy lives. That's where it gets its name. So you're laying these beautiful, beautiful, stunning colored mushrooms out with background art and all kinds of stuff on them. And you lay it out. So you lay the mushroom out, and on the top right corner there's a number, and that tells you how many mushrooms you have to move clockwise around the table. So I'm going to start moving my fairy. Let's say it has 3, and I've got 1 mushroom in front of me. It's going to go 1 to the left, and then it goes to the next person on my left and starts marching along their mushrooms. So, and it plays really well at 2. At 2, it's going to hop across the table, and it's going to start moving along the Peanuts mushrooms. And wherever it stops, wherever that fairy stops, the person who owns those mushrooms is going to get to activate those mushrooms to collect mana. That fairy lands on the mushroom, sprinkles its fairy dust, and that mushroom is activated. And the different mushrooms will give you mana in different ways. So, for example, one of the mushrooms has little lightning bugs on the background, and you will get 1 mana for every lightning bug multiplied by the number of mushrooms. So if you've got, the number of layers, if you've got a 2-stem mushroom, you will get 2 times the number of lightning bugs you see. Another mushroom will stack. So if you've got a level 1, you'll get 2 mana. If you've got a level 2, you'll get 5. If you've got a level 3, you'll get 8. And if you have a level 4, you'll get 15 mana. Okay? Mana is important. And so wherever it stops, it will activate that mushroom. Now, the thinky bit of this is, let's say it stops on a blue mushroom in front of Peanut. If I have a blue mushroom in front of me, I will also activate my mushroom. Now I don't activate every blue mushroom, it's where it stops and mine. So if the Peanut lands on a pink mushroom and she has a pink mushroom, it will activate mine and hers, and they will both generate mana. It's a delight in that way, because before you program your card, you're counting how many steps will this thing move. It's going to move 4 steps. Well, it might land there. However, if the peanut plays a new mushroom beside hers, it's going to totally fuck up how far this fairy's going, right? Not to my advantage usually. So I have to look at her little tableau and go, well, she's got a level 2 pink mushroom and a level 1 blue mushroom and a level 1 yellow mushroom. The chance of her putting a new mushroom out is low, because you want to get your mushrooms as tall as possible. They top out at 4. And so you're like, well, do I count on there not being a new mushroom there? Or do I... And you've got to mind game that first. That's the first bit. And then the second bit is wherever it lands, you've got to suck it. So sometimes you are going to land where you want to land, and sometimes you're not. And the best thing you can do is obviously land on the mushrooms in front of you. So if you can race around the table and land back in front of yourself, that's what you really want, which is great. The second bit is you've got a score wheel, which looks like a little patch of flowers that's upside down on the table. So every time you get 20 mana, you cash your mana in and you add a point to that score wheel. This game ramps up pretty quickly. It's played over 2 rounds. The round 2 mushrooms are much more powerful than the round 1 mushrooms. The whole game, I gotta say, the whole game probably takes about 22 minutes. It's quick, it's easy to teach, it's thinky, and I could see the peanut by second round. She's looking at her card, she's got her tongue half out her mouth on the side, she's counting spaces around the table, but not even moving her lips. She's like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's gonna land there. And if Daddy plants another mushroom, he's gonna absolutely ruin it. It's great. It was so great, in fact, that we finished that game. We had dinner, and I said to the fox, come downstairs. We have this delight of a game that I want you to play. And she was in the middle of one of her paint by numbers. She's like, oh, really? Can I just... I said, get up, lady. Get downstairs. And she came downstairs, and we played Fairy Ring as the 3 of us. And the fox just went, that is delightful. And the second game, you should... Like, the peanut was sitting there from the first card she played. She's like, okay, I'm going to play this mushroom. And you could see if I played a mushroom next to mine and she was counting on me playing, she'd be going, yes! She'd be celebrating that mushroom was good, but she'd counted that into her move. The production is gorgeous. The little acrylics are fabulous. There's a second layer you can throw on of objective cards where you can score objectives, which give you mana. If you might say have 4 different mushrooms, or have 2 mushrooms, 4 mushrooms, 4 levels tall, whatever the case is. The art is great. The pieces are great. One thing I missed in sharing with you is every round, much like a Sushi Go or any other sort of drafting, you take your hand of cards and you pass them to the left along with the first player token. So the cards you didn't play are passed to the left, and whoever has the first player board passes that to the left. So you can't plan 6 steps ahead with what's in your hand unless you're counting out all the cards at the table, and good luck with that, because you won't see them for 4 rounds, and by then you've seen 4 hands of cards, and yeah. And so you're going to program, and then after each round you pass to the left. You get a new hand of cards, and you're looking at the table and you're programming. Fairy Ring's a delight. It's an absolute delight. I will play Fairy Ring anytime anyone is in the mood. I will teach it to anyone, because honestly, you can teach it on the fly. You can just deal the cards up and go, here's what we're going to do. Play a card. You're going to move. Pass it around. Kudos to the team. Fairy Ring is by Lawrence Grenier, Fabien Tanguy, and art by Maud Chamel, and published by Repost Productions. I don't know work by any of them, but I'll tell you what, I'm delighted that I picked up Fairy Ring. All right, so then later on in the week, the Fox, Peanut, and I, we got back into My Island. And there will be very minor spoilers. So if you're playing My Island, skip ahead I'll do the spoilers first. Skip ahead 2 minutes. So we're on a chapter that is, you've been warned, has monsters. Now, the Peanut's been struggling a little bit with the previous chapter. The goal in that chapter was pirates, and the pirates you have to surround by walls to get rid of them. And monsters you have to surround by fields. Every time you throw a field down, you get to color in one of its teeth. And if you fill in all its teeth, you get to override. And if you don't get rid of the monsters, bad things happen. There are monsters. There be monsters. Spoiler over. We had a bit of I won't say a stall, but the last chapter, the Peanut was not so much struggling, but just she was finding it very frustrating. I mean, she's only 9, trying to really, I guess, math out and get her tiles out in the way that achieved the goal of the last chapter. This chapter, with the goal, she was absolutely smashing this chapter's goal, and she's tidying up the stuff that's hanging over from last chapter. We're having a great time with My Island. I have heard it gets a little wild in the later bits. I think we're on chapter 4. think we're on chapter 4. And there's 3 sessions per chapter. So watch this space. That's My Island, Dr. Knizia, published by Cosmos. We're going to be playing My Island for a little bit more. And spoiler alert for incoming, Babylon arrived. Now, Babylon is a game that I saw last year around Essen, and I thought, that just looks like... Oh, if you haven't seen Babylon, Babylon looks like... Well, it's the Hanging Gardens of Babylon is the whole theme. And basically, every player has a board in front of them, and you are going to be building these gardens. You're going to be tile drafting from the quarry, and you're going to be building the gardens. Now, Babylon is one of those games that when you're finished, you look at what you've got, and you're almost more delighted with what you've built than with the score. And the scoring is the scoring's great. So in Babylon, you've got a quarry in front of you, which comes built in the box with 3 levels of tiles. You've got like a sandy soil, and then a granite, and then a basalt. So they're brown, gray, and black colored tiles. And depending on which tile you draft and what's orthogonal to it, you will get a number of pillars. And pillars are something you need to build up your layers in the garden. And once you've taken that tile, you can then put that into your board, or you can store it. You have room to store 1 tile, and you start with 1. So there will be 1 turn in the game, conceivably, if you've done well, where you could play both tiles at the same time. There is no way to ever draft more than 1 tile in a turn. So what you're going to do is you're going to draft a tile, you're going to collect your pillars, and then you're going to build that tile out onto your board. And the board has a number of holes across it. I want to say it's probably 12 by 12 from memory. No, it must be more than that. There's quite a few, maybe 16 by 16 little holes that this first layer of pillars will click into, and then your tiles go on top. Now, anyone who's wearing a sleeve of death is going to have a bad time with this game, because it's about 15% dexterity game, because you do have to build this thing up. Now, it's not quite like playing Jenga, but if somebody did have a coughing fit or hit the table too hard, or if there was a sleeve of death, the game would be over. That would be my only niggling complaint with the game, is that a little more expense to make these tiles. They would technically have to be triple layered, but it would mean that the pillars would click into the tiles, and you would have a much more robust... We didn't knock anything over, but it was we did have a couple of close shaves. So you're going to build your tile, and on the tile, there will be a number of icons. Pictures of stairs, fountains, statues, or bridges, because there are a number of extra decorations that can go on. So, for example, the tiles at the top of the quarry, in the top layer, you're going to get lots of pillars, because you get pillars based on not just what's orthogonal, but what level is next to you. So, without going into too much, if every orthogonally adjacent tile is the same layer or lower than you will get a pillar for that side. And you collect the tile, and if the tile's flower also matches your starting board, you will get a pillar for that twice. So you get a pillar for the tile you've chosen, a pillar for each orthogonal side that is the same height or lower, and 1 if the flower matches. So you can get up to 6 pillars by drawing a tile. Now, obviously, the further down those tiles go, if you take a tile from the next level down, not everything is likely to be at that level or lower. So you're going to get less pillars. However, the tiles are more powerful. And by that I mean the top layer of tiles only have 2 symbols on them. The middle layer of tiles have 3 symbols on them. And the bottom layer of tiles have 4 symbols on them. And this is the way it works. You're going to place your tile out, and let's say it has a bridge symbol on it. If you have another tile lined up with it, you can build the bridge for free, and the bridge will go across to the 2 tiles. If you have a fountain on the tile, and you have another fountain layered lined up, you can build the fountain for free. You can build a statue for free. Now, statues have to be, this could be a hard one to describe, they have to be orthogonally in line in your entire tableau for you to build a statue. And if it's not, you can't build it. And the nice thing about a statue is the statue is the same height as the pillars. And so if you change your mind later and you want to overbuild, you can overbuild on a statue with the next layer. And you want to get up as high as you can with as many decorations as you can. And this is like, oh, I'm going to build. And then you get to like your 4th or 5th tile and you go, can I take back my last 4 turns and rebuild it? No, you can't. And that's where this is fantastic, because your board this is where it gets a little bit Calico-y. And I say a little bit because it's like Calico meets Cascadia, but it's in 3D, because you're going to get points for decorations. So Here's how it works. At the end of the game, and there's a game timer, a really clearly defined game timer, which is a stack of tiles that you flip over after each round, and if there's a symbol on it, it will adjust the next round. Forget about that bit, right? Who cares? It will give you an extra pillar, take away a pillar. It gives you a little bit extra to think about for the next round. When the game is over, if your bridge is on level 4, it's going to be worth 12 points. Bridges are worth 3 points times whatever level you build them on. If your fountain's on level 2, it's worth 3 points times whatever level you build it on. You also have stairs. You can build staircases. Staircases will score by adding the 2 levels they connect. And statues are worth 1 times whatever level they're on. Seems really easy, right? Like really easy. Okay, so fountains will only connect tiles that are touching. Bridges will only connect tiles that have 1 space between them, so tiles that are not touching. Staircases will connect 1 level to the next, but because the way a staircase is shaped, you have to make sure that the symbols, the little stair symbols that are on your tiles, are offset. Now, you can build decorations for free. They cost you nothing. If you light it all up, it's like, Shazam, I'm building that decoration. Building a decoration means you can't put a pillar on the next level. And pillars are how you build up. There's another rule in that you cannot directly overbuild. So you can't build a level 2 tile by slapping it straight on a level 1 tile, as in it cannot be lined up edge to edge with the level 1 tile. It has to be built across 2 tiles. So this is where I say, you get your first 3, your first 4, your first 5 tiles out, and you're like, yeah, this is easy breezy. And then you get to tile 6 and you go, shit, a brick. And you're like, and it's almost worth first game. I reckon you play 5 rounds, you go, right, this is your chance, guys. Do we want to start again? Because if you start again, you're going to... Anyway, it was fantastic. Babylon was fantastic. The fox cleaned my clock. She's like the first play queen. Every time she's playing something for the first time, she just looks down and goes, oh, what does this do? Oh, okay, this is cute. Oh, what does this one do? Oh, she couldn't remember how to calculate how many pillars you got by drawing a tile until her very last turn. And I would say to her, okay, you want that tile. How many pillars do you get? She's like, 3? I'm like, no. Okay, so you get 1 for the tile, 1 of the flower matches, 1 for everything that's orthogonal that's the same layer or bottom or lower. You get 6. Okay, so she takes 6 pillars. How many pillars do you get for this one? Don't get me wrong. I adore the fox. I think she's the greatest human being I've ever spent time with in my entire life. But the way she parses a game by just lackadaisically going, I think I'll do this. And then she beats me by like 9,000 points. It just makes me laugh every time. And the way she cleaned me up on this one is at the end of the game, there's also an element of set collection, right? So the tiles also, they all have flowers on them because you are building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And when you plant them, when you lay these tiles down, they add flowers. It's a stunning game. Go look at a picture of Babylon. It's a stunning game. And you get set collection. So for every set, there's 4 different flower tiles. For every set, you get 4 points. Well, I had a really, really great garden. It got to level 4, and I had staircases that were scoring like 7 points and bridges that were scoring 12 points. Guess how many sets I had? Spoiler, it was 0. I had 0 sets because there's 1 color flower I didn't put out there. And so the fox had something like 16 points in flower sets, and I had 0. It was a delight. You know, I could play this with the peanut. I think that if I played with the peanut, you know, there might be a little bit of just... When you get to that level 2 and level 3, it is Bernie. It is Bernie. Like, the decisions based on how am I building this? How am I going to get this up? How am I going to build this? How do I line these things up? I mean, I got to the last 4 turns of the game. The last 4 rounds of the game, I was sitting there going, James, you have fucked yourself into a corner, buddy. Because Babylon. Babylon is great. Loved Babylon. It's by Olivier Gregoire, art by Creation Studio, and published by Geek Attitude Games. So good. Now, another spoiler alert for incoming. I got my copy of Men Nefer. Men Nefer we're going to talk about 2 more times this episode for reasons. Men Nefer is a Euro that is set in ancient Egypt. Men Nefer's somewhere in Egypt. Euro. But don't get me wrong, not just the art skin on this. I mean, it's a Euro, so the theming... Look, this is like mini game the game, but the way the pieces all interlock is fantastic. Now, this is by German P. Milan, who has made another one of my favorite games. It's responsible for making Bitoku, and Bitoku is very similar in that it's that almost not so much mini game, but it's very point salad-y. So in Mennefer, you have 7,000 meeples in your color, and you are Mennefer. I'm going to talk about Mennefer later. So Mennefer, it's basically you've got 3 workers, which are called apprentices, and they're going to go out on the board, and they're going out into the sun space on the board. And the sun space is next to the night space. So they're going to go out on the sun space, and they do nothing. Right? They do nothing. Except that on your board, they're sitting next to an action tile. So you put the apprentice out in the sun space, and then you get to do the action that's on the tile that was next to that apprentice. And that action will be any of a number of things. There's like 8 things going on, tracks on the board. There's a temple. As I said, it's minigame the game. And so once that tile is used, it goes into the discard, and that's your turn. Really, on Mennefer, you're doing one of 3 things. You're putting an apprentice out into the sun space and using the action tile. You're moving the apprentice from the sun space to the night space, which is associated with a long track of things that you then go up and have actions attached to. Or you are drawing a new tile from the market, a new action tile from the market, which you will have access to next round. Okay? And that tile gets slotted into one of your tiles, and then at the end of the round, you bring your 3 apprentices back, and you are off to the races again. So the math of this is a little bit wild, so stick with me. So you get to put 3 meeples out and do 3 actions. You get to move them from the sun to the night side, which is 3 actions, and you get to take 3 tiles, which is 3 actions. Now, the tiles that you collect from the market, they have a small mini action next to them, like not quite a full turning action, but a mini action as well. So taking the tile isn't just taking the tile. You take the tile, you pay for the tile, and the more expensive the tile is, the better the mini action is associated with. So, 3 different things you're doing of 3. So that's 9 turns you're going to take. The game is in 3 rounds. So that means you're taking 27 turns, right? 27 turns in the game. That's a lot, particularly when some of these turns get a little combatastic. Now, if you're playing 4-player, that's 108 turns to play the game. Like, that's wild, okay? Like, it's wild to think that you're going to play a game and you're going to take 108 turns. Now, don't get me wrong, like, I think about bringing Dusty to the table for this one, and it fills me both with glee and dread. I remember my first game of Bitoku with Dusty, my only game of Bitoku with Dusty, it was 4 hours long. And I had a great game. It was super fun. But because it's so sandboxy, it nearly busted his frontal lobe. It's kind of sandboxy, but you can only do 3 things on your turn. You can put a worker out, you can advance that worker and do the turn associated with it, or you take a tile. I'm actually keen to see how Brother Dusty does with this game, because 128 turns, like, just the whole thought of that math, it just fills me with some kind of, like, deep-seated, visceral, primeval fear. But that said, in theory, the turns are pretty quick. Anyway, Mennefer, look, I'm not going to bust into it too deep because I'm going to talk about it again in voices in my head. It's a delight. I think Mennefer, I played 2 solo games. I played 2 full proper solo games. I lost both of them, but I like that in a solo game. When you can't quite catch the victory, it makes me hungry for more. I would happily put it on the table and play it again tonight. Mennefer's great. I think it would be, if I did a top list from last year, it would certainly be up towards the top. It's fantastic. Can't wait to play it with real people. That's by German P. Milan, art by Laura Bevan, and published by Ludonova. And then this morning, this is Sunday. It's Sunday in Sydney, Australia. I pulled another game off my shelf of first, and that is Daitoshi. Now, Daitoshi is part of the series that De Veer has done. It's in the same universe as Bitoku. The mythology is it takes place several hundred years after Bitoku. Bitoku's all sort of fairies and mythical magic stuff and gardens and hills and whatever. Whereas Daitoshi's more about an industrial revolution. And Daitoshi has this really I want to say spectacularly interesting interplay on the board. And so what I did was I played a two-handed game. I played half a two-handed game to learn the game, and then I played a full proper solo game of it. And so Daitoshi has this great big busy board, not quite as wildly busy as Bitoku. You look at Bitoku, and it feels like a fairy and a unicorn got drunk and spewed all over the board. Once you get to play Bitoku, it makes perfect sense, but the board is like fanatically busy. The game's amazing, right? If you haven't played Bitoku, play Bitoku. The game's amazing. Daitoshi, it's a busy board, but nowhere near what we're talking about with Bitoku. And it's got this fantastically clever rondelle in the middle. So you've got two units in the middle. You've got a prestige piece, and you've got a bus that's being dragged by this giant worm, which clearly I haven't played Sand yet, but is going to play into Sand in some way. I'm assuming Sand takes place another 200 years in the future when Arrakis has taken over the world. We'll see, because there's worms in Sand, another video game, same universe. So you've got this bus that's being dragged around, and as they get dragged around the rondelles, anything they pass or stop on, you're going to get bennies. Now, the prestige bennies are really hot. The bus bennies are kind of medium. They're more resourcey and that sort of stuff. And then around that, you have a 3-tiered ringed city that's in 5 sections. And you're going to start with only the first ring. And so you seed the board with a random layout, and then depending on what you draw for your own board, you're going to pop your worker out in a specific area. And each area does something different. One allows you to trade with foreign cities. One allows you to research new inventions. One allows you to run electricity to a section of the city. One allows you to build a new section of the city. And the town hall is wild, which will let you do anything you want from the rondelle. And circling around this is this gigantic airship. Now, if you've played a Devere game, particularly in the Bitoku universe, you know that they have these gigantic chunky meeples that usually indicate round markers, whatever the case is. In Bitoku, you've got this gigantic mythical caribou. Well, you've got this massive airship that basically is sailing around the city, and there are different things that cause it to move. And if you happen to be in the same section with the airship, then you have extra things you can do. The airship has a worker space you can go to. So each section of the city, of the 5 sections, there's a worker space. There's actually 3 worker spaces you can go to. And they cost generally steam to get into. Steam is a currency. I won't call it a resource because there are 4 resources in the game that you're managing. But steam is basically a currency. And it's going to cost steam, which is the power source in the game, to get into these, which represents the amount of time it takes you to travel around kind of thing. So you're going to travel around this rondelle to your next stop. And if you get into the prime space, it's going to cost 1 steam. That's going to let you use the workshop there if you have a worker. And then, and this is one of the things that I think is really clever about this game, because Daitoshi is all about push-pull. And I'm going to focus less on the workshops and the actions and the workers and more about this. Everywhere you go causes you to pillage or destroy part of the wilderness. There's 4 wilderness tracks. You know, there's a water-based one, there's a mountain-based one, there's a forest-based one. I can't remember the last one. There's 4. And so depending on which space you move to in Daitoshi, you have to collect one of these tokens off the board. Now, collecting tokens off the board opens these beautiful tracks that you've got your pilgrims marching down, but it does slot into your board. So you have 4 spaces on your board for the 4 different colored tokens. As you slot them in, they will give you a worker of that ability, and they'll give you either coal or water, which is how you mine steam. I don't want to talk about that, but if you get 2 of the same token, if you get 2 blue tokens because you stopped at 2 of these, you are damaging thematically, you are damaging the same area too much. Your Industrial Revolution is irresponsible, and you create, you anger the spirits, you anger the Yoktai who are in that area, and you have to flip your tokens over. This is wonderful because on your player board, you have 4 different spaces that have a slotted in panel. And so long as you haven't angered one of the 4 spirits, that panel is wonderful. It does great huzzah things for you. As soon as you anger the water spirit, you have to flip the water panel. And that then diminishes one of your actions. Okay? You can have one of each. You can have one of each wilderness tile. As soon as you have 2, you've angered the spirits. And you have to flip your tile over. And then when you take that action, it's a lesser action. And this is wonderful because the way you appease the spirits is by building new parts of the city. So around the second and third rondel that go around Daitoshi, you build those out and they have temples on them. And what that allows you to do is move your angry tiles, which have been flipped, back into the city. And when you do so, you get another bonus because you're starting to appease the spirit. And so you've got this beautiful push-pull in that every time you take an action, you're going to take a piece out of the wilderness. And if you have 2 pieces of the same wilderness, your actions become less powerful, which sucks. But then it means you want to be building out the city because it means you can somehow get rid of these tiles, which then flips your panels back over and brings them back to full strength. There's a lot of moving parts in Daitoshi because also each of those 4 tracks, you're going to have a pilgrim moving down them, much like the pilgrims that were up in the forest track in Bitoku. And each of those 4 tracks scores in a different way. And it will score, a lot of scoring is based on how much of this corruption and how much of this influence you've had in destroying the wilderness. And if you can get rid of them all, then you do wonderful things and you get great huzzah scoring. There's a lot more going on in Daitoshi. I could talk about Daitoshi for another half hour. I'm not going to. Daitoshi is fantastic. I know I'm saying fantastic about a lot of games, but Daitoshi was a game that I was at PAX last year and I won a copy. They were giving away 3 copies. I had to draw and I won a copy. The box was in really bad shape and the guy said, look, we're really sorry. These came, all 3 copies of the game. The boxes were really in bad shape. So I've done a box repair. You can look at my Daitoshi box and go, what the hell happened to your box, man? It was a free game and it's a great game and it's a game that I really wanted. I hadn't pre-ordered it yet because it wasn't even available for pre-order in Australia as a PAX last year. But it's another one that's been on my shelf of first and it's another one I've gotten off my shelf of first. And I've locked in a play with 4 people for next Saturday at the Board Game Barbecue Game Day and I'm very much looking forward to it. Daitoshi is great. Daitoshi is by Danny Garcia, art by Marina Vidal, published by Devere, who are absolutely killing it in the last sort of 3-4 years. That's it for the games that were. 44 minutes of games that were, and they were good games.
Boxes on the doorstep, new delights inside. Heaven's on fire, fields to divide.
Ooh, this week on Incoming, a few things have come in. We've talked about 2 of them. Mennefer was something that I ordered. It's released finally for purchase in Australia. And I ordered it. Babylon, again, these are not crowdfunding games, but finally was released in Australia and I've ordered it. Still no sign of the game which shall not be named, but apparently, allegedly, in dark corners, people are talking about having received shipping notifications in Australia, so fingers crossed. I've got a shipping notification finally for River Valley Glassworks with all the upgrades, the only playable version. Very much looking forward to that. And after a year and a half of umming and ahhing, I finally caved and I ordered Bone Wars. So Bone Wars is coming this week as well. Bone Wars is by Game Brewer, who are no longer in business. I managed to get the all-in deluxe version for slightly less than it actually ran for in crowdfunding because I think, it's one of those games that it's not a stunning, amazing game. I think the average on BGG is about 7.7 or something, but I love the looks of it. It's got a real Darwin's Journey kind of feel, like every warm-blooded boy. I was always fascinated with dinosaurs and dinosaur bones growing up, and I love the look of it. And the all-in Uber Deluxe version has some really nice, shiny toys. So that's what's incoming. Postman Pete's not going to be too busy, but yeah, good times. This week on FOMOMOFO, some interesting stuff about. Spoiler alert, I haven't backed anything this week. There were some things I was watching, some things I wanted to learn more about. But we're going to start off on Kickstarter with Champions of Wind and Fire. Now, Champions of Wind and Fire, there be dragons, and anytime there's dragons, I love the look of dragons. And so this is an interesting looking one, not overly complicated, where you are basically dragon building and training. You start with the base dragon, and the dragon has these little parts that fit into your player board, and you can upgrade the dragon. Then you're going to train the dragon. It's got some interesting dice drafting components. It's got some really good looking components. The gameplay looks fine. I don't think it's breaking any molds with the gameplay. And then you take your dragons and you fight them in tournaments, and I was looking at this one thinking, oh, this could be a really fun one to play with the Peanut. Because, you know, dragons, and the Peanut loves dragons, just like I love dragons. It's a game that's rated, 10 and up, and it looked like a bit of fun, breezy, dragony stuff. In the end, look, I've got Dragon Eclipse coming from Awakened Realms, which I won in a contest, thank you very much. And while that one's looks like it's meant to be for a slightly older crowd, the Peanut's really coming to the table more and more, and she's starting to grok games more and more, and sitting through longer and longer games. So I thought, well, we'll just leave that. But it does look interesting. The all-in is $169 Australian. Shipping is $36, which is about 21% of the cost of the game. It seems fairly reasonable. I don't know that it's a $169 game. Look, dragons. Champions of Wind and Fire on Kickstarter. The second one that popped up, now this is not for me, but this has like Buttercup squeeing in the background of my head. This is called Artistry. Now, Artistry is by the same team that brought us Botany and Fleur. And you can really see that in the look and feel of the game. Botany and Fleur, again, two games I've not played. Fleur I looked at briefly. Botany I looked at when it was originally on Kickstarter. And at the time, my Kickstarter budget, my crowdfunding budget was a lot lower, a lot more sedate than it is now. And otherwise, I probably would have picked up Botany because it looks really interesting. Artistry is for 8 and up, right? It's this game about art. It's got this really interesting retro Art Nouveau feel. It's not my style, right? But it's definitely got a great vibe. It's got some really nice chunky gourmet pieces. The gameplay looks fine. It's not, I don't think it's got, uninteresting gameplay. I think the draw for this is the art. It looks like it'd be a nice afternoon. If you feel like you have way too much money, well, they have the jewelry box edition, which literally comes in a handmade wooden jewelry box. Wait for it, $360 Australian. Hey, look, if you got $316 Australian for a game that's definitely not a $300 game, but you wants it, then good for you. Take it. The base playable version, the deluxe version, of course, because anything less than the deluxe version is totally unplayable, is $120. The shipping is $40. It's a whopping 33%, which I'm not sure I get, but again, what's probably happening is a lot of other places, a lot of other crowdfunding campaigns are showing shorter shipping or smaller shipping, is they're probably hiding it in the price of the game. Realistically, if they made this game $129 and then made the shipping $31, it would sound a whole lot better. It's the same money. It's all just head games. Head games. I'm a victim. If you love art, this looks like an easy buy. I'm not being funny, but it's likely to go to retail. I don't know if the deluxe version will go to retail. Probably the unplayable version will be in retail. But if you're FOMO'd up, Artistry looks cute. The next one on the list is Tiny Epic Adventures. Now, Tiny Epic Dungeons, I think, was my very first ever crowdfunding game. And I have everything Tiny Epic Dungeons. Now, I'll put hand on heart and say, I don't think I've played Tiny Epic Dungeons in 3 years. I will never sell Tiny Epic Dungeons, not because I'm so enamored with the gameplay, but the gameplay is good. I think it is a really good dungeon crawler. It's a really fun dungeon crawler with really fun art. The rulebook for Tiny Epic Dungeons, now this isn't a discussion of Tiny Epic Dungeons, but the rulebook for Tiny Epic Dungeons is a hate crime. But luckily, Dized has a full step-by-step tutorial. You throw Dized on the table for Tiny Epic Dungeons, and it makes sense of everything. The biggest issue with the rulebook is it doesn't explain the iconography very well, and there are a lot of icons. Once you've played it once or twice with the Dized tutorial, it's fantastic. I even have the playmat. I have everything Tiny Epic Dungeons, which you can get again now in this campaign. Tiny Epic Adventures, basically, well, first, you go to the campaign page. The campaign page spends 50% of its entire length, which is, I don't know, it's got to be 1.5 meters of scroll space, reminding you how great Tiny Epic Dungeons was. So there's that. But it looks like it's adding spiral adventure books, Jaws of the Lion style. I tried to discover as much as I could about the gameplay. It looks a little bit like it's adding a little bit of narrative, not quite a choose your own adventure, but a little bit of narrative. There's no app driven or anything with it. It's nothing like that. But it's got these spiral books. It looks like it's a little more like find the keys, unlock the spaces, adventure-esque. You don't have to have Tiny Epic Dungeons to play it. It uses the same mechanics, the same gameplay, or similar at least, as Tiny Epic Dungeons, which are perfectly fine. I didn't end up backing it largely because if I want to play something like that, I'm going to play Agamonia, which has the spiral books, it's not got hidden spaces, but it's got the emergent narrative on the board. And I think I've just sort of outgrown that level of game. I will keep Tiny Epic Dungeons because it'll only be another year or two before the Peanut's in the wheelhouse to play Tiny Epic Dungeons, and then we'll get 2 or 3 years of play out of that because she will love that. It's a $64 game for $28 in shipping, which is 43%. I have no idea why it's $28 shipping for 2 eensy-weensy boxes, because if you own any Tiny Epic games, these are, quote-unquote, the biggest boxes Tiny Epic has ever done. They're still small boxes, spoiler alert. $28 shipping is fine. $28 shipping for a $64 game, not so much. Anyway, Tiny Epic Adventures looks fun. If you're a Tiny Epic fan, it's more Tiny Epic. On you go. Last one for the day. I want to talk about Blasphemous, but only briefly. So Blasphemous is on GameFound, and they started advertising Blasphemous 4 months ago. And the landing page for Blasphemous was great. Great art, really gritty kind of art style. Really weird Conehead miniatures. Now, Blasphemous apparently is based on some kind of video game IP. I had no idea. I played a lot of video games. I watched their video and it had like this 32-bit sort of animation for the game, and I'm like, that's why they look like that, because they're Coneheads in the game. Look, it looks like it would be a blast. It looks like good fun. It's done by Ludus Magnus. Ludus Magnus have done a ton of games, a ton of really high respected games, a ton of games they've done very well in crowdfunding. They've got a history of delivering. As far as I can tell, I think it looks like Ludus Magnus has done at least one other IP game for a very lesser known IP. It's a no for me, largely because the gameplay itself, there's not enough in it for me to say, well, that's different enough to what I have, or I need that. The minis do look good. The minis look really good. And as I said, they've got a great pedigree for production. I was watching this one to learn more. It's a no for me. Not the least of which, the deluxe level of the game is 450 Australian dollars. And you clappers know I feel anything less than deluxe is unplayable. There are lower pledges, right? But for me, I want the toys. I have a bunker. I have a space I can leave stuff set up. Shipping's another $90 on top of that. So I would hope it's a freaking massive box of stuff. That said, $90 is only 20% of the purchase price of the game. So anyway, if you like Blasphemous or you don't have a game that's like that, I've got Lands of Evershade coming, which is going to give me all the dungeon crawly D&D RPG-ness that I could possibly want for at least the immediate future. Well, not immediate future. The immediate future once it arrives in anywhere from 18 months to 5 years. Blasphemous looks good. It's expensive. Looks good. That's about all I'm watching live. There's a ton coming this year, including Awaken Realms has just announced Agricola meets The Walking Dead. I mean, no, but also fuck yes. Like, who doesn't want to farm with zombies? I don't know. That's what it is. Anyway.
Voices in my head, I'm talking to myself. What board game should I get down off the shelf?
This week in Voices in My Head, I want to talk about specific themes that tickle you, right? Like, there's a lot of there's space themes and sci-fi themes and, historical wargaming themes and I mean, we now have Space Bees. Like, whoever saw Space Bees coming? Like, if you had Space Bees on your bingo card 2 years ago, congratulations, you win bingo forever. The one I want to talk about, for me, I love ancient-y, civ type themes. And look, Ancient Greece, my favorite. All hail Aeon Trespass, the greatest themed game that I think I've ever played, where the theme is the game and the game is the theme, but it's interwoven. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. ATO, I love you, I love you, I love you. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I want to talk about Ancient Egypt, because there are a ton of Ancient Egypt games, and there's a couple I really love. I mean, you can talk about Ancient Egypt in, like, Ra. Ra's a great game. Ra by Rana Knizia. It's a great game. Super Trooper owns the overproduced uber deluxe version with the 4 foot tall Ra and the woefully unnecessary, sorry Buttercup, cartouche scoring bits, and every piece is every tile is wood and twice the size it needs to be, and it's fantastic to play. And it's Egypt themed. It could be race car themed. It could be Tom and Jerry themed. The theme is really, like, it's really spray painted on. Great game. Love it. Love it. Love Ra. Love, love, love Ra. It's a timeless game. It will be a timeless game for a reason forever. Love Ra. And then we got something like Ankh. Now, Ankh, I think I've only played Ankh 2 times, maybe 3 times. I've loved the 2 plays I've had. And Ankh is, it's like, Ankh is area majority war game, right? With really interesting action selection mechanism. It's got an interesting board state. It's deeply interactive. It's got a wild game mechanic that's basically polarized the entire gaming community with the merge. I'm not going to talk about Ankh. But I want to talk about 2 I love. 2 ancient Egypt games that I love. And I'm going to talk about them together because they have a lot of similarities. And yet they are such different games. Now, the first one, I think I've played it 3 times, and that's Tickle Obelisk of the Sun. Now, Tickle is a fantastic game. Tickle is by Daniele Tascini, who is, one of the Italian greats. Daniele Tascini, who's made a lot of the T games. He's also made, Voyages of Marco Polo. And the other one is the one I've already mentioned twice today, and that's Men Nefer. Now, Men Nefer is by German P. Milan. We've already talked about that. So these 2 games, I love both these games. I've already decided that Men Nefer is going to be one that I'm going to play a lot because the decision space is great. And let me be clear, I would play Tickle anytime. The last game I played with Tickle was a bit of a rough start because we took it to PlayCon and we hadn't played it in a year. And this young fellow sat with us and he said, "Oh, can I join you?" I went, "Yeah, no problem." And then it was like 45 minutes of reading the rulebook to go, "Oh, hi, how do we play Tickle again?" Anyway, had a great game. Lost miserably, but I would play Tickle anytime. I not only love the game, I love the theme. And again, the theme could be anything, right? Like, this is a Euro of the Euro. Tickle is Egyptian Euro, the mini game, times 9, right? So is Men Nefer, right? Men Nefer, it could be, you could put it in Mexico. You could put it in Spain. You could put it in, I don't know, you could put it in Indonesia, right? You just change the geography, you change the theme, you change the temples. Huzzah, you have another game. They didn't, they chose Egypt, and I love it. I love Egyptian mythology, Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Norse mythology. I loved mythology all my life, and I think it's partly because I'm an atheist, so I think, mythology is as good as religion, and I can get behind it. I can get behind Zeus throwing a lightning bolt down someone's ass, go Jeff Goldblum, just as much as, a quarter of the Earth's population can get behind a fellow who walked on water and turned his body into bread and wine. No disservice to religion. I don't have it. Right, so I love mythology. And so I want to talk about how these overlay, because I realized after playing Men Nefer twice yesterday that they have some real similarities. This won't be a long voices in my head. I just want to share. My experience with you guys. So both games have worker placement elements that are really sort of twisted sideways. So in Tickle, you're not actually placing workers. You're pulling them off the board, right? You've got these dice that are on the board, and they are white, brown, black. I think there's a yellow, goldy die as well. I can't remember. I think so. I think there's 4 colors. And you've got this gigantic 15-inch penis in the middle of the board, right? It's an obelisk. So this is the obelisk of the sun. And as the game progresses, it's going to spin, which will represent the sun moving around it. And as it spins, it changes what the dice can do on the board. So you pull the dice off the board depending on their color. They can do a number of different things. Depending on their location, they can do a number of different things. And they have to go on the scales of fate to weigh at the gates of the underworld, right? So you've got to balance the dice that you're taking. It's a delight. So you're pulling dice off for your work rather than putting them out. And if you leave the dice there as the obelisk spins, those dice will be able to do different things. They go on different sides of the scales. In Men Nefer, you're placing workers, but when you place them, they don't do anything. You place them out, and where they left your board is the action you get to do, right? So you're going to have 3 apprentices. We talked about this very briefly. On Mannefer, you've got 3 slots with action tiles. And when you place the worker out, it does nothing on the board. It goes into a space, and it will cost you to put it in that space if that space is full, right? But basically, you are doing the action of the space it leaves, which I can't recall seeing overly often. Now, you are then later refilling those tiles, which is thinking ahead. You've got to think ahead to your next round of turns as to which tiles do I want, because the action tiles all do different things. But you're basically taking the action of where you pull them off. The Tekenu system of pulling dice out from around the obelisk and placing them on your scales is really clever. And one of the things I like about both of these games is there's never a moment where you are painted into a corner. Now, you might not be able to do what you thought you were going to be able to do because the obelisk has spun, or because Super Trooper's taken the black die you want. Thank you very much, Super Trooper. I needed the black die because I was going to balance my scales, and it was in the space that was going to allow me to get my statue into the quarry. But I can't do it now because you took the black die. Thanks, mofo. Similarly, in Mannefer, when you put your peep out on the sunny spot, your apprentice goes from your board, it goes into the sunny spot, and if there are 3 other workers there, it's going to cost you 5 food to muscle your way into that space, and then it's a race to the darkness spot on the other side, because if there are people waiting on the other side, it also costs you food to get in there. Now, I think this is really, really clever, and one of the things I love about both of these games is at no point can you dissociate from the board state. Now, you are simply taking a worker and moving it from one space to another, right? But the board state will absolutely dictate whether you can even do what you need to do by taking that worker off. And I think that is an absolute delight. Both games are Egypt the minigame, right? With a complete side of point salad. Now, Tekenu, you've got the quarry where you're building statues. There's area majority scoring, and you get resources and whatnot. You've got the what's the market on the top right where you're building stuff out. You're putting buildings out. You're putting pillars in, and you get the score for the perpendicular lining up of that corner, which you also get in the mechanic in Mannefer when you mummify your dead, and then you take them off to the crypt. And you put them in the crypt, and then you get bennies that are off, to the left side and the bottom side, depending on how they line up. There's a lot of really clever similarities here, and yet the games feel so maniacally different. Each board has 6 or 7 little corners that you've got to interact with. And just like Tekenu, if you try to interact with all of them in Mannefer, you're cooked, right? You can't interact with everything. You've got to sit down on the board, and when it comes down to your turn in Tekenu, you've got to look at the board and say, well, Super Trooper's going in here, Dusty's going in here, I'm going to start in here. So you get a foothold in a space, right? Otherwise, you're constantly chasing. And while I've only played Mannefer solo, the solo is excellent, and it doesn't feel like you're playing solo. The solo bot is smooth as silk, and I actually never felt like I was playing a bot. I really felt like I was playing another player. And the push-pull on trying to get into the spaces, and much like Tekenu, if I'm chasing the bot into a space, I'm behind him every time. I'm going to go, well, he's getting in there, I'm going to get into these spaces, because being as good as the person that's on the board is not enough to win either of these games, right? You've got to be better than them in the same game, in the same mini game, or better than them, or you've got to completely outstrip them in other games they're not touching. Both of these games have this, and I think it's fantastic. Both of these games have an outstanding level of player interaction. Now, I'm not saying I'm passing stuff to Super Trooper back and forth. We're not doing trades and that sort of thing. But you've got markets on these boards where you're trying to get tiles off of them. And the tile you take matters. And if somebody takes the tile that you want, it matters. It matters to you, right? If somebody builds in the space you want, it matters. It's like you have got to look at the board state, and you've got a head game what's going there, because you've got to race to the spaces that will give you what you want. And if somebody else gets there first, you have to pivot. And if you don't pivot, you're going to die. Not really. No one dies playing these games unless you're playing Teotihuacan, in which case you die every time. There's lots of death in Teotihuacan. Not Egyptian. Similar feel, though. It's Mexican. But again, Teotihuacan has a lot of similarities to the way this plays. You know, it's Mexico, the mini game. You're going around the rondel. And if somebody gets there before you, you're fakakt. In Tekkenu, you know, there's a lot of blocking in the area majority in the quarry. There's a lot of racing to the good spots in the market builds. There's a lot of, you know, it seems that whenever we play, Super Troopers always chasing the statues, which make your actions more powerful. It's not a part that I've gone down before, but you're always chasing to be the first because there are limited bits. And in Mennefer, you are making offerings at the temple, right? And when you make an offering, you're basically putting something that you've crafted into the temple, and you get bennies, and the benny spaces are limited, and so the good benny spaces go first. When you carve your Sphinx, and then there are like 18 spaces to actually build your Sphinx out to honor the Sphinx on the board, and there are diminishing returns as you build those Sphinxes. You have to be so in tune with the board in both these games, because you have to be able to look at and think 2 or 3 steps yourself ahead, but also think, okay, this is my plan. If Dusty goes there, first I'm going to throat punch him, and then I'm going to have to go over here, right? Because the tactical work you've got to be strategic and tactical. You have to have both. Both games have very busy boards, but I want to say in the end, both games have outstanding iconography. By the time you're 20% of the way through your first game of Tekkenu, you've got it. By the time you're 15% of the way through, 10% of the way through your first game, Mennefer, I looked at it, I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? Thank you, Mr. Paul Grogan. I watched the first 15 to 20 minutes of your playthrough and tutorial. I didn't watch the whole 2.5 hours, but watching the first 15 to 20 minutes allowed me to actually understand, how do I take an action? What am I doing here? Right? It was very clear. And it is very clear. And once you get that iconography down, it's a piece of cake. Both games have multiple markets with tiles that move from one end to the other and get cheaper as they go. I love that, because if you want the tile that's the most expensive isn't necessarily the best tile in the market. It may just be the one you want and you need. And you have to prioritize. Am I going to spend more to get that tile? Or am I going to chance that Super Trooper will take a cheaper tile and it will get cheaper next round? Both games leave me with this deep satisfaction in the end. And that's, I finished my game of Mennefer, and I thought, I feel like I've played Tekkenu in the best possible way, without saying this is Tekkenu. It's not. They're both Egyptian. I also felt like I felt when I play Teotihuacan, the same sort of feel, right? You get to the end and it's deeply satisfying. And the thing that I loved about both of these games, and you can layer Teotihuacan on top of this, it's not Egyptian, but it's the same style of game, is that I never ever feel like I'm totally locked out from making a good turn. Okay, so I can't do what I want. There are 9 other options, which are good turns. They're not great, but they're good. In the end, I'd happily have an all Egyptian day with both these games on the table. I'd throw Ankh down in the middle to break up the Euro of the Euro, play Ankh, then we'll Mennefer it. I think that would be a great day. I think it's fantastic. I love the Egyptian skin in all these games, and I think they're magnificent. Mennefer is shot right up to one of my favorite games of last year. I've played some really great games from last year. I've still got more to play, but I think, if I were to make a top list of next year, Mennefer would certainly be up there. That's it. That's all I got. This week's clap. Well, if you're following everything that goes over, this is a simple one, guys. Okay? This week's clap goes to tariffs. Good luck with that, mofos. And that concludes this week's therapy session. Thank you, OMC crew, for letting me lie on your leather couch while you nod slowly and take notes. Please now burn the notes, because I don't want any evidence. My new work schedule is a little bit aggressive. I will do my best to stay on top of weekly episodes. Next week, I am at the Board Game Barbecue Autumn Game Day in Castle Hill with Super Trooper. It is my wildest hope that Sunday morning after that, we will get together and do a post-game day wrap-up bonus episode. If you are there at the game day, come track me down and say hello. I will wear my OMC t-shirt, which will make it easy. You can reach me on all the socials. Find me on Facebook by searching One Man Clapping. You can email me at wonmanclapping@gmail.com. Instagram, blah, 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 blah. You can help OMC by dropping us a like on Facebook or Instagram. Leave a review on whatever platform you choose. Good review, bad review, funny review, not suitable for work review. I can take it. Thank you as always for your time. Your time is precious. And the fact that you chose to waste, an hour and 11 minutes with me this week is very humbling. Until next time, get your game on, even if you've got to play with yourself. And remember, research shows that people who play games live longer. What research, you ask? Well, according to Facebook, we don't have to fact check anymore. Just trust. Peace out, mofos.
Locked in the bunker, shadows shake. One man clapping secrets away. Board games living, dice they break. Echoes pounding, hearts they quake.
In the bunker, board games rolling. One man clapping, stories growing. Hard rock thunder, speakers blowing. Clapping loud, the unknown sound.
God, there was an underlying theme in this episode. How did the male elephant find the female elephant in the long, tall grass? Delightful.